September 8, 2022. Buckingham Palace has announced the death of Queen Elizabeth II, aged 96. After her passing, it is expected that her son, Prince Charles, will ascend to the throne as king. However, I'd argue that he shouldn't be proclaimed as king, and instead, the kingship should be passed down to someone who is more qualified and more beloved by the people of the United Kingdom. Of course, I'm talking about Bob the Minion of Despicable Me 1, 2, 3, and Minions 1 and 2 fame, or as I will be referring to him from now on, King Bob. Right now you must be confused and shocked by this statement. Your brain probably looks like the state of Big Ben right after the passing of the Queen. However, fear not, commoners, as I have valid reasons as to why I think King Bob is more qualified than Prince Charles. My first point is that King Bob historically and legally is the rightful king of Britain. Why, you might ask? In the first Minion movie, as Bob and his Minion friends was being chased down by the United Kingdom government for money embezzlement charges, Bob happened to stumble upon the sword of King Arthur, which has been plunged into a rock, and out of desperation, as he is cornered by the feds, he tried to pull out the sword. And to everyone's surprise, he did pull out the sword. Now, legend states that whoever pulled Mr. Arthur's sword out of the rock is legally the king of Britain, which is why historically and legally King Bob should be allowed to be king as he pulls the sword out. Sure, he gave the kingship back to the Queen at the end of the movie, however the fact still stands that King Bob is the rightful king. King Bob pulling the sword also leads me to my next point. It must have taken King Bob some big muscles and power to be able to pull out a sword out of a rock, and while King Bob did have a little device that might be enhancing his arm's strength, I'm sure that his base stat is still good enough to pull the sword out of that rock without the device. Which is why I believe that King Bob the Minion could absolutely destroy Prince Charles in a 1v1 slugging match. It just makes perfect sense. Honestly, it won't be even a fair fight. King Bob has shown many times his ability to withstand any damages inflicted to him, which always resulted with him walking out of the whole thing unbothered, while Prince Charles, I'm afraid, wouldn't even last a second before getting vaporized in a nuclear blast. It is also worth noting that King Bob was present at the Battle of Waterloo with Napoleon, which means that he must have served with Napoleon's army, making him not just a regular citizen, but a veteran of the Napoleonic Wars. Also, he was professionally trained in the martial arts by this Asian lady. Now, unless Prince Charles was busting down the
manœuvre sur les guillemets simple inverse RS
maneuver 19th century warfare style and fighting off abominable man-made creatures with his martial arts skills, I'm sorry, but Prince Charles is absolutely getting slogged by Bob the Minion. With this, we have established that King Bob absolutely destroyed Prince Charles in the physical category. But how would they compare in the ruling category? What will the country look like under their respective rule? Firstly, I can tell you that Prince Charles'
reign
will be absolutely boring, dare I say mid even. Prince Charles has no swag at all. He hasn't hustled a single day in his life, which would make him terrible for the country's economy. And he hasn't got the experience to build up a society. Also, he can probably die at any moment. Compare that to King Bob, who is practically immortal, seeing how he has existed since the Paleozoic era, and how he is immune to any damages or disease. He also have experiences in building a society, as Bob and his people have successfully built a utopia before in the Nicene Cavern. This experience would definitely help King Bob develop his ruling skill, which is perfect for a future leader as he knows how to build and rule a country. He's also been on the grind since the dawn of time, as he's always looking out for a job to make some cash. So he understands economics and how to make money for his subjects. Adding to this, when King Bob becomes king, the country will experience an industrial boom, as he can employ his other minion buddies to practically be a slave labor force. And as we see in the Despicable Me franchise, these minions are a great source of cheap labor who can build anything for you. Plus, there's a ridiculous amount of them. This would not only be a huge win for the country's industry, but also the world's technology advancement. As we see in the movies, the minions are capable of building anything. Although sometimes flawed, these yellow creatures can definitely kickstart the space age if they wanted to. Meanwhile, Prince Charles wishes he has an army of cheap laborers that he can employ for an industrial expansion like his ancestors did. My next point is that if we compare their respective reign from a diplomatic angle, King Bob would be an absolute beast at the world stage. I mean, who wouldn't want to work with a country whose king is an absolute cutie? World leaders would fall on their knees every time Bob walks into the UN headquarters. Meanwhile, no one is gonna be speaking about trade or commerce with Prince Charles' old scallywag ass. While life might sound good under the rule of King Bob, we have to acknowledge that at his very core, he is still a minion, and minions tend to seek and serve evil, as it is shown multiple times in the film. So my guess is that if someone is evil enough, King Bob and his friend might just abandon the country to serve them or gives up the throne for them, like in the first Minion movie. This is definitely a huge flaw in King Bob's entire rule. So yes, there might be a slight problem here. However, I think that the positive outweighs the negatives here. Plus, if my minion theory is correct, maybe at some point King Bob would view himself as the ruler of all minions, hence negating the core belief that a minion should serve an evil villain, and instead he becomes the one who the other minion serves. And with that, I think that we can comfortably say that King Bob is the better option on the ruling part. And overall, he's just way better than Prince Charles. So in conclusion, I believe that King Bob the Minion of Minions fame should be appointed as King of the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth, as he is arguably the best candidate for the kingship. And he is legally the rightful heir to the throne. I've been Luige, ancient historian, professor, PhD doctor, classified field researcher scholar, and a philosopher, signing out.